Stand together and join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a few folks that are attending to some other business, so we are going to start with the executive committee this evening. So we're going to begin with Mr. Campbell and his vape presentation.
Thank you for letting me present. Mr. Gamberling is kind of the PowerPoint. I just wanted to give you guys some info on vapes the last 3 years of school. So when you flip to page 2, you'll see that our high school is in black, middle school is in the orange. In 2020, 2021, when I first started in the middle school, we had 5 incidents of vape. In the high school, we had 21. In 2021, 2022, we had 7, so this is an increase of 2 for the middle school, and then the high school, we had 24, so an increase of 3. This year, we've seen a huge increase in the middle school, where it went to 27 incidents in 124 days of school. An increase of 20. I was just very concerned about that situation. The high school, we're at 19, so I think that we're right around the same that we would be as of last year. So some things that Mr. Scoggins, Mr. Rance, Mr. Berge and I all discussed, we put some things into place. So when we go to the slide number 3, for the high school, your first offense when you get caught with a vape. When you get caught with a vape, it's 1 day of OSS, so out of school suspension. Also a verbal warning of, we're not going to send you to the district magistrate. The parents notified, the SRO is notified also. I'll talk about the SRO in a second. And then next year, we're going to put in place where we're going to have an online class. Catch My Breath is what it is, where that they are required to take this class to get more education of how unhealthy it is of these vapes. The second offense is a 3-day OSS, all the same things in place as the first offense. And then the third time is when we would go to Dr. Bickhart, because obviously they are not listening to the rules of the school. Difference when we go to page or slide 4 for the high school to the middle school is that the first offense is a 3-day out of school suspension. And this is to try to make sure the students understand we're taking this very serious at a young age. The second offense would be a 5-day out of school suspension, and then it would go to the superintendent. Some things with the school resource officer that we just started this year that we got is every vape is tested for drugs, so that they have a wipe that they actually open up the vape and can test for a controlled substance right on the spot. We did not have this process prior to this. I will tell you this school year, just in the high school, that there were 7 times where this came up positive. So I actually am very happy with that from Chief Zettermeyer, that he helped us out with that standpoint. We all have go bags in both school districts or school buildings with gloves, masks to make sure that we are all protected from fentanyl or anything like that. So we have that all taken care of. Next page is just how the court hearing would start. So the first fine. So on your second offense, I would do a district magistrate referral. So it's the same thing as tardiness to school, where I would send it down to Judge Deal, schedule a time with him. The first fine is usually around $150, depending on court cost. And then the fine just continues to increase after that to 200 and 250. On the right-hand side, it just talks about how the court hearing process would be. The next page. This is everything that we put into place so far. So we have 2 vape detectors that we purchased and actually have here. We're just waiting for those to be installed by NRG. Mrs. Girton actually got a grant for us of $50,000 that I want to say it was 2 weeks ago that we got approved by the state. So that money would purchase more vape detectors also. On February 2nd, Judge Deal okayed us to go down there and have district magistrate referrals for vapes. We held a meeting with all the principals and himself and myself to talk about this. The next thing is that we talked about presentations to every class in the middle school. That happened on February 7th. And then tomorrow, actually, the high school is having all their presentations to all the students. Last thing is that we have a community presentation tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in the high school auditorium by Dr. Bickhart's sister through Evangelical. She's been a huge help for us. She spent many, many hours here for us, have had multiple meetings of trying to help with this situation. Next part is just what happens when the vape tests positive for a controlled substance. So again, every time when we get the vape, the first thing I do is call the SRO down so that he can get a hold of it. He tests it. If it tests positive, they are going to charge them for a controlled substance. They'll have a court hearing with Judge Deal. The school district is taken out of that process. And then finally, that they'll have a fine or possible community service or probation. One other thing that we do is a SAP referral. So it's a student assistance program. So I send a message to our guidance department. They do a meeting with the whole entire guidance department on every Friday, and the principals and some other people that are trained in SAP. They also then will notify the parents. Teachers will fill out some forms, and then we'll actually have a meeting with the parents, the students, and some of the staff to decide on what other programs are available for them to get some help. And then the last part is just a link to the Catch My Breath. I just put that on there if you guys want to take some time to look at classes that the students would be taking for next year. Anybody have any questions?
Curiosity question, just taking the middle school number out of this, how do the number of infractions align with back with the tobacco days when it was just cigarettes that we were talking about? It more or less?
I will let Mr. Scoggins talk about that.
It's a great question. I was just sitting here thinking that Mr. Campbell being in the middle school and high school has been a huge asset because certainly those numbers that you're thinking about back in the day with traditional cigarettes and tobacco products, the numbers were very similar. But because sometimes I wasn't able to get to all of the students in all the places, being in a one administrator model in the middle school, having Mr. Campbell here to assist and to track down those things and be able to teach our kids the health benefits of staying away from that stuff. It's all been extremely positive, but it did take me back to those days when traditional tobacco was an issue, both in the middle school and the high school.
A couple of things. I'd venture a guess once the vape detectors are in, our numbers will probably double because there's no way we're catching everything. And secondly, this is from a parent's perspective. I kind of disagree with the OSS for the first offense, is probably ISS, because if you have a kid that's sneaking vapes, and you send them home for a couple days and the parents aren't home, well, what are they gonna do at home? Sneak vapes. But if you can keep them in the building and breathe fire down their neck the entire time, it might mean more. I always think like, you have those kids that act up just to get kicked out of school, so they won't be in school anyways. Well, did we ever think about closer monitoring? And
So I'll comment first. And I think that 15 years, especially my elementary experience wasn't with vape, but it was always sending my little kid home is what they want. Right? You're going with the same model there. And I think we struggle with what can be done and what is the right.
I mean, if it was one of my.
Yeah, I
kids,
know.
I'm gonna
I
bring them
understand what
back
you're
in
saying.
here,
I understand what you're saying.
And they're gonna sit by
Yeah.
Mr. Scoggins all day long. And I hope he'd make some menial tasks and all sorts of different things. But
I will tell you, every case is a different case. So obviously, when we have that parent meeting, we come to the best solution for each student. We do what's best for each student. I know that with Mr. Scoggins, Mr. Berge, and Mr. Rance, I know that we have sometimes gone to ISS instead of OSS because the parent's not at home.
Mhm.
This is just what the normal thing is that we do.
Okay.
Every case is
And
different.
that's a good point. I think we have had that conversation pretty thoroughly, from a leadership standpoint of these situations, especially if they get pretty in depth, we try and look at them case by case. I think that was done in the past.
Mhm.
And I think it's a model I've tried to, with their advice to keep because each case is different. But hopefully you got the text today and it had the video link. I can't stress enough the fact of that class tomorrow night, if parents can come, we want to push it as much as we can, especially elementary parents, because the problem we have, like I'm looking where it said middle and high school. Like the reality is, that middle school model is probably going to be, whether it's Mr. Stetler dealing with fifth grade or lower, like they're accessible. We've had that conversation with the police of how do we make them less accessible, in stores, but kids get them. But we need to take a stand on, we're not going to accept it. We're going to put vape detectors in. We're going to get an uptick. But
Mhm.
hopefully the initial uptick then creates a shift in, okay, we really can't do this. We're going to get caught.
Mhm.
What was the response from the students? How responsive were they to?
For the standpoint of when we did catch, or from this standpoint,
Yes.
they were taken back of the standpoint of the district magistrate referral. From the standpoint of the fine and that the police were going to be more involved in the situation. So I think that was a good thing. We haven't had a person get caught the second time yet, to go down to the district magistrate. But the other thing that we're doing also is that if you get caught this year, that goes with you and even to next year. So that, hey, I can't just get caught once every school year. It's going to follow you so that you stop is what we're going to try.
And I commend Judge, I got a chance to meet Judge Deal when we were having this conversation about this as well as other things. And the fact that he is willing to be such a great partner and do that is huge. That's not seen across the Commonwealth, I don't think, where every district has that level of support. So when you can do that, that's wonderful, so I'm excited that we've gotten the grant money. I think we're going to look towards, we're hopeful that, I'm hopeful that with the budget, the state budget coming out, and if they continue with grant monies, this is a great way to counter. It's a message to kids. We will not accept it. We're going to do everything we can to stop it. I'll say, Max has said it to me. Well, let me comment on two things. Mr. Scoggins said, and I know Mr. Berge and Mr. Rance are coming. They're dealing with something else right now. But, Mr. Campbell's connection to kids, his back and forth between buildings is an incredible piece of what we were able to do. It is so, being that this building has 7 or 6 to 12 here, it allows for that. And what he is able to do in the relationships he builds, I would argue that some of the reason why, even when these things happen, is he's able to build relationships with kids that they don't want to have to deal with that again. So I think this isn't just about punishment and punitive. It is about building relationships and trying to get their attention. I also know, and I think one of the most important things we need to state, and Mr. Campbell has said this to me, is our biggest fear is kids aren't paying attention to what are in those vapes and the danger of what can be in them. And our greatest fear is the wrong thing at the wrong time. So the more we can say, you try to do it here, you're going to get caught, the less likely to bring it in here, the safer our kids are. And that's, I think, what we're getting at. But, back to Mr. Moser, your point is, it's also a parent's responsibility to take this on. That's the other hard part of this is the kid did this. You need to stay home from work, send the message and make sure it doesn't happen again. But, I think each situation is different. I appreciate that perspective. So, but a huge, thank you to Mr. Campbell for what he does. I know our principals are heavily involved, but it's a great team effort and we're going to combat this. We're going to go at it head on. Please, parents, come tomorrow night is what we want. Anybody listening, share it with somebody. Tell them to come tomorrow night. If one person learns something tomorrow that saves their child's life or another child's life in the future, it's all worth it.
Excuse me. I do have a question about tomorrow night. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So tomorrow night, what time, where exactly, and who is invited?
So go ahead, Max.
Everybody in the community is invited. It's tomorrow at 7:00 in the high school auditorium.
And are
Wow.
kids to come to this one as well, or is this more of an adult driven?
Absolutely. It's a whole family event.
Okay, so I have a middle schooler and an elementary schooler in the district, and I don't see any notification of this event tomorrow.
Did you get so it was on, we put it out on Facebook yesterday. We also, we've been talking about it with kids, but
Has there been an email out
did
to
you get the
parents?
text today that had the specifics of it?
No, I got nothing. And I don't check Facebook every day. So for families that don't hang on Facebook, are we sending district emails to let them
Yep.
know we're doing this?
There were no texts.
It went out as a.
We'll work
Everybody
on
else get that in their text today?
I mean, it's a
Nobody.
great
I got
opportunity.
it.
I didn't get it.
Have to get it out to people so that they know to come.
I got it.
Yeah, we did a Sapphire Blast.
Okay, I did.
I'm looking around the room right now, Dr. Strasser, and there are many people who did not get it. But we did a full Sapphire Blast with the video link
No,
that
I
has
got-
all the
I
details.
didn't get it either.
Some people did and some didn't from a text.
And kudos to Mrs. Girton. Thank you again for your hard work on getting us awarded another grant. That's it. Thanks.
Well, what we can do is this, we can have the event tomorrow. We'll continue to push it. If we need to do a second, as Mr. Campbell said, I know the presenter fairly well. It's my sister. She works for Evan. She's done this for years. So if we need to bring her back in, we'll do it. We can do this as many times as we need to get as many families here. So we'll look at the Sapphire push and see who did and who didn't get it. And we'll continue with our presentation tomorrow, but we'll do a second one if we don't get a good turnout. We'll make sure we do that. So we have all the materials ready. We just,
Could we include Judge Deal if we do another one? Like, could we ask him to come and just go through the judicial process and how this could impact their future? Or is he going to be included in this?
Did you just remind?
Not coming tomorrow night, but he's more than welcome.
and we did invite him. Yeah.
On any part of this.
Yeah, we told him come to anything and
He tends a lot of things.
If you're on middle school, remind.
no, he's reminds coming through.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Are there any other questions? This segment before we take a look at the proposed agenda items, 6A and 6B. Any questions on any of the items?
I'm sorry.
Thanks, but
Yes.
We're going to step into the Facilities Committee. Mrs. Kessler.
thank you, Mrs. Vance. Under facilities, we're going to have a Bakra update from Jeff.
Good evening, everybody. So I was out all last week. When I got back, was very pleased with the progress down there in APOD. All the walls are studded up. They finished that today. They started routing sewer lines for the downstairs bathroom, restroom area, and some other areas. So they're saw cutting the floor. They did a lot of it yesterday when we didn't have any kids there, and they're working this evening when kids left. So later this week, we're going to start roughing in electric, and we are looking at all the blocking that goes in the walls for the projectors, whiteboards, the tack boards. We actually are going to start the framing for the soffit that goes around the whole perimeter of the basement. That's going to begin tomorrow as well. It looks totally different down there. You can see all the classrooms. It's laid out pretty nicely. They came in with a mini excavator, dug the hole for the elevator shaft. That was done Monday. What else? Still working. I got the price back on food service equipment, which is going to take place a year from now, but we were out to bid on that and got that back. That's completed. We probably won't buy that though until next year sometime, maybe this summer. Just about everything that we're handling inside the district has been completed this far. Anybody have any questions?
Well, I'll make one other comment is, so beginning, Damien will be at this next Tuesday night to give a more formalized presentation where we're at. We anticipate, like, I'm getting these wrong. You told me there's two different types of meetings. There's a job meeting and a superintendent meeting, correct?
Correct. They're just like the last project. Jeff Brophy will he'll run the meetings. We'll have a weekly superintendent meeting with all the primes or the contractors out there, the foreman. And then once a month, we'll have a regular progress meeting with us.
So I think from our perspective as a, committee, I think Thursday mornings at 8 a.m. were they last, how they did it before?
Yes.
So that could be a similar, I don't know if that time frame works for, I would assume an 8 a.m. is better than anything, correct?
Mhm.
What I'm also going to do, I talked to Dr. Pickard the other day, I will give, like I did before, my weekly update. I will give us the weekly progress and what's going to happen the following week. I'll start doing that and put that right in his information he sends you folks. So you have an idea as we progress what's going on and what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Jeff, we had the conversation that's important for the board to know is you're in discussions now on BPOD.
Yeah, I know we just got started in APOD, but we're already starting to plan the removal of furniture, the demo work, everything BPOD. We're trying to schedule this so once we are doing the finish items in APOD, school should be out, and we're going right up to BPOD and demo and all that out, trying to get all the noisy work done this summer while the kids are home. So by the time they get back to school, APOD will be with kids and we'll be finishing BPOD, all the finish item work. So we're already starting to plan all that. We're already in talks about contractors moving the furniture out. Where are we going to go with it? Blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. It's already happening. I mean, I've already got the drawings for all the casework for BPOD. They're submitted right now to the architectural studio to make sure all the furniture fits in the floor plan. So we got that. I've already in talks to release the furniture, the classroom furniture from Tanner for BPOD. So that's ready to go once we're ready. We're looking probably around October for BPOD. Right now, everything's going well. So, I mean, it's looking positive. Then we're moving to CPOD, which was already a little bit of talk from that already. So, yeah.
We anticipate updates coming through Jeff weekly.
Yep.
We anticipate weekly meetings with the job meetings. So we'll keep keep the committee as part of that and go from there.
Get a chance, you're over there, take a look at it. It looks totally different again. It's like a little classroom.
Have you been down, Mr. Slater? Mr. Decker? Yeah, I haven't been down lately.
Job site as well. 3 trailers now, big mound of dirt where they park and where they live. So they're definitely it's happening.
So the last fun part of the story happened about a month, well, maybe a few weeks ago was we had to make a quick decision on some countertops and some windowsills. And we went to Mary and Cindy for their opinion. We went with what they said. So hope you don't mind on that. They should have an opinion, right?
Yes.
Don't panic. They're white.
Yep. They got it, but it was different shades of white. And they were like, this is what looks good, the speckle. Like it was, they deserve to be part of that decision making.
Great, thank you. And next on the agenda, we just have some facility use request and then the list of decommission items. Does anybody have any questions about those? Hearing none, I think that's it for facilities. Thank you, Mrs.
Can I throw something out to the board, a discussion question under facilities? So as I've been thinking about ways to cut costs and expenditures, the more I've thought about the awning at Bacher, the more I've started to question how much do we really need that? And I just kind of want to throw it out to the board.
Wait, are you talking about the canopy?
Canopy. Is that something that can be cut? I mean, we've lived for how many decades without, our students have survived, our faculty have survived. You're not going to have it at any of the other buildings. And the other thing I'm thinking is if we do realignment, which is being discussed, our littlest kids are going to be at White Deer without the benefit of an awning. So just throwing that out there. Is that something that could be cut to save some money?
We'll put an awning, White Deer for the littles.
Not quite a
There's
big.
an awning at White Deer.
Yeah, there is. There's a
Halfway.
there's a half awning. Yeah, yeah, there is protection for it.
It's kind of a standing joke. It's not a joke. For some reason, between 2 and 3 o'clock, the heavens open,
Every day.
whether it's raining, snowing, sleeting, it happens. But unless you have children that come home wet and soaked and because they're standing outside, I see it. I see parents have to wait out there as well. We don't allow the kids into the parking lot. I would hope that we would, but I think it's a necessity, not an item.
I agree with Mr. Slater. I think it's an absolute a need, not a want. And it's a hard no for me to take that off the list, but I
Well-
appreciate the discussion, Andy.
We paid for the design.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So right now, I mean, we might as well see the design and what it's going to cost. We really don't, we really can't cut anything that we don't have a price tag on, right? So they're working on the design as we speak. So we're going to get that and get a chance to look at it and have opinions.
I think if we could look at anything else, it'd probably be the playground of where we could, hone in and figure out where we can cut down the budget and
I agree.
make a really good use of the space.
And I think we are already having that conversation.
There.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
Donation.
Yep.
Options.
We're
there.
gonna come with a plan to you of reducing that line item. That's our goal, but we were putting a plan together for that. But I see that, again, those were 2 areas I looked at. I know the canopy's a hot button topic. I mean, came in at 900,000. I think we're maxing out at 500 right now, and who knows what the design is and what we can do with that design. So maybe there's a little bit of savings still, but I agree. I think the playground is not that we're not doing a playground. I'm a huge elementary person. We need playground. I want kids to be able to play. We're just going to try and look at a creative way to lower our cost and try and, ultimately it's going to be phase 2 of the capital campaign is what we're looking at there. We'll get to that late spring.
Okay, all right, hearing nothing else, I think that's it for facilities. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Let's keep moving on to Personnel Committee. Mr. Frederick.
Yeah, so we have a couple policy procedure. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. We have a job description discussion. Who would like to lead that?
Me. So in front of you, you have what we have, and I want to just make sure we're clear. This is not a new position. In front of you. Package. Was.
I don't think we do.
Okay. Is it on agenda manager?
Probably isn't. Yeah, it is.
Probably is on agenda manager.
Here, I don't have a copy.
Catherine, you can make me copies. So I'll begin the conversation. I'll have Dr. Patrick make some copies. It's on Agenda Manager. Brenda had shared that. So as we evolve this position, this was taking within, and Dwayne, please jump in if I'm saying this or Derek incorrectly. We've had a help desk position open to support our tech department. Inside of just that role being a help desk, we've not been able to fill it. So we came to the table and said, what do we need to do differently? Creatively, we need support. This is not a case of not needing additional support, but how do we balance what the support would look like for Dwayne along with other areas of the district, kind of morphing what was a tech position into something that can support athletics, technology, office area, whatever it is. So that's kind of where we built the discussion. But the most important part is it's not about adding a new position. It's shifting something that we do need. We need as much support from the tech side as we can get. We're just thinking we might get someone more interested if it wasn't just a tech help desk position. I mean, Dwayne, do you want to share anything from your perspective on what you're expecting it to do?
So we're hoping that get into our help desk, answer the easy questions, redirect tickets like most like work. Triage. Pretty much just triage and just kind of answer these questions. Say, okay, this is Dwayne's specialty. This is Aaron's specialty. This is Alejandro's specialty. Kind of direct and help that so that when I log in, I'm not looking at 200 tickets. I'm looking at 20 tickets. that are My specialties. Aaron's looking at 20 that are his. Right now, I log in 200 open tickets in there. I've got to wait for all to see what tickets are my specialties or what tickets I can handle. The triage. help.
So as you're getting this now, and thank you, Dwayne, I think what's important here is, I think you all know this, we need as much tech support as we can have with two people right now. We're hurting, but as much as I would like to be at a single position, we just don't seem to be attracting anybody that just wants to be a help desk person. So we're trying to think of other ways to create something that ties it all together. So there's some things there for you to consider. We tried to look and think, how do we support as much as we possibly can? And this is what we came up with. So.
Looking at agenda. You have agenda manager open.
We're having difficulty logging in.
It's not in there.
No.
Tech support.
I'm an agenda manager and I can't see anything for a job description.
It's not in there.
Email works.
I apologize. I thought it was.
Two attachments.
We're spending way too much money for.
Now you have it paper-wise in front of you to consider. So please, I don't want this to be like not a conversation. So I'm open to any feedback, any thoughts.
I mean, looking at this from my perspective, I mean, I'm just looking at this now for the first time and looking over everything. The only thing I don't like about it is that you're reporting to 3 different bosses, so to speak, and that's a lot. I mean,
Fair enough.
you have to kind of put in order, well, who takes precedence? Is Dwayne going to take precedence because he needs the most help with help tickets? Like I think that's I think you're gonna have to decide who directly they report to and figure out what their main responsibilities are. And then maybe that goes down
Okay.
to some subsets.
That's fair. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I actually hire a lot of blended roles like this, and it's very difficult to do. You're looking for a unicorn
Right.
sometimes, that perfect person that fits them all. So.
Perhaps we would consider Courtney for the individual that the person would report to. And then we would just work collaboratively with Courtney to just.
That makes sense.
Responsibilities.
Again, please take time this week. We can talk about it next week before we vote. I want to make sure we put it in
I
your
would
hands.
suggest like a certain number of hours per week devoted to each task.
So we've kind of
way-
done that in our own minds. We've
Right.
done that, like the time frame. We've had that conversation with Rod about, not needing every moment of every day, but a little bit. Dwayne was more like, we need the mornings. I need to know when they walk in the door. Can they check it? Can they get in? Can we see that? And then,
I wouldn't
Catherine,
need
like,
every day. I would just need particular
happens, yeah.
times. Yeah.
I mean, Rod needs some help in the afternoons and stuff when things are going crazy.
I think that's a great point. And that's kind of our conversation has been.
I agree. I definitely see how you get lost in there.
Do we have the current job title, like what the position we're trying to,
So the help desk was its own job title. And what we did is we pulled out what we thought.
so is that just like under responsibilities, like the first 5 then? Is
Yeah,
that would fall
yeah.
Under traditional, or are they getting a difference in salary then for?
It would be a little bit different. We haven't run, I think we had that conversation. Yep. But
It would fall in the same classification in the handbook. So we remember the salary matrix that we developed. It would fall on the same pay scale as the former help desk position. So it would be based on experience, but someone with qualified 6 years experience in help desk or 6 years experience for this position would get the same pay rate. So there really wouldn't be a difference. And I think to answer your question about those help desk tasks, the first few are from that help desk position, but that help desk position had more above and beyond that. So what it did was it kind of limited in scope the help desk piece to free up time to then do the other parts. So a little less tech oriented so that someone could come in with maybe little or no experience in tech, but develop those skills as they came. So it's more of an entry level position that anyone could take on and potentially learn and oversee and kind of develop from there.
So this isn't adding anything to the budget then potentially as far as salary goes.
No, it would just be removing that tech help position that's already budgeted for and just moving it into another spot of the budget, but there'd be no overall increase, no change.
No change to benefits or anything like that.
Nope.
And we think that the changes may make it more marketable.
I do. I think it's much more, I think sometimes I think you were saying this, right? You get deep down to a tech help and you're only tech related. Like how much do you want to just do all of that? Like this is a little bit more entry level, gain experience in different areas. I think it is. I think it's more eclectic. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's.
I think if we're ultimately looking for tech support, you have a lot of job descriptions for this person. Will they have time to actually be educated and learn how to do tech support?
Anybody else can comment. I think our goal is that entry level, as Dwayne said, those initial things. We're not even getting that off the table. If we could remove that with the first few moments of every day, the first couple hours, it would be a game changer. I think it would be huge for you, and we're just not getting that now.
Yeah, I don't think the belief is that this position would be a tech position any longer. It would just be a position that would assist the tech department. So there wouldn't really be an expectation for them to really get deep into tech knowledge or anything like that. Now, if they get inspired by it and like it and show that they're good, potentially there could be a career path there, but it's more so a secretarial position, a / assistant position than a actual tech position.
I think somebody used the word triage here. Did you use triage? I think that's a great word for it.
Delegator.
Yeah, it organizes and goes.
Looks a lot like data entry. That's what I was kind of thinking, like, as I was looking through what it has in there, is like updating, inputting and stuff. I just wanted to make sure that we were looking at something that was marketable when I was looking at it. So as long as it improves the ability to fill a position, then that's good.
Well, we'll know if you approve it and we open it immediately, we'll see what we get and we'll be able to tell you right away if we're getting any kind of applicants for it.
I just feel like that's a tall list of things for an entry level type of job. I think you're gonna have to hone in the list and maybe just other duties as assigned as a general.
Yeah, maybe pick out the big.
Okay.
Because if I looked on our website and saw this as an entry level, I'd be like,
See
oh
on
my
LinkedIn and
gosh,
scroll
that's a
down.
lot. Yeah, it just feels a little overwhelming when you first look at it.
Maybe there's certain things in there that can just be kind of chunked together instead of having 20 items listed in there.
Just
that
keep
maybe-
28, number 28,
I'm just looking at it.
There
like,
you go.
That's fair.
Exactly.
Number 28. That's fair.
Perform other duties as assigned.
You can tell them, this is what you do. We'll take that feedback. We'll come back and I'll bring a adjusted version for next week. And if we're ready to vote, that's great. Any other comments?
Along, the
Thank you.
only other thing we would have would be the proposed agenda items. If you want to take a look through those, they are the standard leave, resignations, hiring, volunteers, etc. Any questions on those?
Close to hiring 11F.
She just turned it down.
Take 11F off.
We're gonna take that one off
Yeah.
the agenda.
No, I found out about 4:30.
Oh, sorry. Back to the drawing board.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. Nothing further under personnel.
Legislative and Policy Committee, Mr. Frederick, I guess, unless Dr. Strasser, you want to do it from,
No, go ahead, Mr. Frederick.
Okay, so we have some new policy procedures.
Yep, so I'll jump there. So that's a discussion piece. So I know that was brought up. Mrs. Ettinger and I did talk about that, the board policy that exists under that. We are going to begin in 000s anyway, as a full overhaul. I mean, I'm sitting here looking at them. They're all those policies as well as the ARs. So we have I think I mentioned this last week, our leadership team is dividing and conquering on a handful of topics. Not that, multiple people will be involved in multiple things, policy being one of them. We're starting right here in this area. So we'll be bringing some adapted policies, including the procedural piece, of how we want to handle. I would like to see, when you look big picture, over the next 4 years, that we get through every policy. And I think if we could do, it's a daunting task to say out loud, but I think a lot of new superintendents hope for that from what I gather in my conversations with others, but keeping that update going. So that's our plan right now.
Can I add to, when you're looking at the school board policies and procedures, it was mentioned last time we met about the school board members not needing to have clearances. I think we should look at that because we are invited into the buildings during the school day. So we are engaging with the students at times. I think it needs to be that we all provide clearances.
with my question for 20 years. I can't understand it. I really can't. Is it PSBA? Ribbon? I mean, who?
I don't know that
who is
answer.
Yeah, it's like who?
What I do know is we have already dove deep into the actual policy. I don't think our policy is that bad when it comes to volunteers. I just think we need to procedurally make sure we clear, I think it's guest, visitor,
Right.
volunteer, right? We have to
Right,
just dive
and-
deep
and
in.
direct contact with students versus like indirect. So if you're selling a hot dog and a soda to a student, that wouldn't be considered direct. But if you're, in the classroom working one-to-one or in an extracurricular working one-to-one, that would be direct contact.
So that is actually,
Oh, that's a Pennsylvania thing.
policy is one of our categories. The other one is volunteers and handbook kind of items. So that's another area we're working on too. So I see an adjustment coming in, or not an adjustment, a procedural change coming in. This is what we expect from these different groups.
I don't think we can make a choice if the board can have clearances or not because it's an elected position. Like, we can't require clearances for the board. It's a publicly elected position.
I'd have to.
I don't-
I'd
Yeah, we'll have to
to
dive
look
deep
up
into that.
language. I don't
The
know.
last time I asked that question, that's what I was explaining, that it's like you legally can't require the board to have clearances since it's a publicly elected position.
Well, Carl will
I
be
think,
here
like,
next week,
we
so
were-
we can ask Carl. He will be here.
I believe we had that
Like, when we're in the school, we are to be supervised with,
Right.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah.
we're not just supposed to be in the school as a board member. If you're in the school as a board member, you're to be supervised by building principal, yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I do not have that.
Acting
I'm
as
not
a
going to
coach
claim to know
or
that answer.
something else, then you have your clearances and then you're on that capacity.
Curious minds want to know.
Okay, and then besides that, we have the proposed agenda items, which are the normal open records report and the first reading of 4 new policy addendums. Any questions?
And going back to policy and, reviewing, I'm still curious to how we go about creating a new policy. I know Brenda had sent that one attachment to me that talked about it, but I'm still not clear of how do I propose a new policy?
So the one thing we talked about last week was the PSBA fee that we pay. So anything like that comes through them. So if initially we get from them any changes or anything, are you talking just
Local policy.
a local policy?
Local school board policy, yeah. Not at the state level, just a local board policy.
I believe we'd have to go through the same first and second readings as any other policy.
That's what I would say. We would have to develop it. We'd write it. If it was on a topic, we would align it to the
Who would create it though, the solicitor?
framework.
Or would it be?
It would go
us?
through.
We would send it.
Well, okay. Yes. So we are currently working in a consortium right now with the other districts on possible placement, special ed kind of things. And there is a discussion right now on policy being created and being brought back and solicitors looking at it and sharing that. So that would be the exact process. It would start there. We could develop, we would have Carl's input on it and then go from there.
If you're talking about something unique just to Milton, I mean, the board
It's
does.
just to Milton itself.
Yes, I mean, that's something that you can propose. It would need to go to the attorney to be written and voted on. So again, I think it would go through the same procedure. You could go back to PSBA. They could
Right.
help you write it. You could provide them your wants, your requirements for a policy, and they would guide you through the process. But our policies there can be policies that are unique just to Milton based on.
Yeah, I looked at our local ones, Chris, and I didn't see anything related to this in our local board policies. That's why I was interested in creating one ourselves.
Sure.
But is that something to talk with personally, like the solicitor could call me or I could call him? Get some input?
Work with.
Yeah, I think we could work together. We can look at it and go from there. I'm looking for.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else under legislative and policy? Further.
Athletics and extracurricular, Mr. Moser.
Looks like all we have this evening are the proposed agenda items. They're athletics, 9A and 9B. Athletic coaches. And volunteers. Anything else, Rod?
I'm gonna add a piece.
Okay.
Mr. Harris. Expect some collaboration between you and an individual named under 11I-2. What's your question? It's not a question. I want you to work with him. I want you to bring him in. Oh, relax.
Soccer coach, isn't he?
Oh,
Okay. That would be a potential help for some teams fielding a round ball.
Got it?
Got it. That's all I have this evening.
All right, that's everything for athletics. Education and Technology Committee, Mrs. Kessler.
Mrs. Rance, for education and technology, we have agenda items regarding career and technical education accounting program. Is there any discussion on that at all? Seeing none. And then we also had Educational Advisory Committee volunteer approval requests. That does it for education and technology. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, that's all, Mrs. Rance.
Go back to finance committee.
You
Okay,
can go back.
all right.
Actually, I'm gonna comment on one thing.
Sure.
Mrs. Kessler, so it's, and that's what I was looking at here. It's policy 009, which is policy development, is the actual policy we have on how it's run. So we can look at that and follow the process there.
Fantastic.
I knew Mrs. Ettinger and I had that conversation. I put the policy back in the pile and didn't have the number right in front of me.
Thank you.
So there it exists. We'll go from there.
Go back to number 1, begin the night all over. So
We go special
should
ed
we go
first.
to, yeah.
I got 'em
we
both here.
Well, we could do regular ed first.
Well, I'm gonna
or
go check
special ed.
on
Okay,
Mr. Ransom, Mr. Berg. Yep.
oh, okay, let's.
Let's see if you
special
start.
ed.
You're okay.
All right.
Thank you. Tonight, Misty Harris and I will present the special education budget. I'm primarily going to talk about historical budget numbers and ceremoniously pass the baton to Misty, who obviously has taken over the department this year. So under the umbrella of student services, on slide 2, you'll see the overarching areas that are covered. Special education is the highest budgeted amount. And so we do take the time during budget season to provide the board some information on that budget. But just for your general knowledge, under student services also comes section 504, which is chapter 15, gifted, chapter 16, nursing services, guidance services, alternative ed, homeless foster services, school safety and security, and many of the other mandates that are in place for school systems, including threat assessment teams, student assistance teams, multi-tiered system of support, suicide prevention, and our trauma-informed schools. Next slide just gives you an overview of the services that we provide in special education in-house versus services that we have to contract out for. So we have classrooms, which in special ed are often talked about as programs. So elementary autistic support, middle school autistic support, high school autistic support. There are 13 disability categories in special ed in Pennsylvania, and different supports are needed to support any individual regardless of what disability category that student qualifies for services in, but we tend to match up those services to that disability category area. When you look at certain related services that students get, oftentimes it is not fiscally responsible, or school districts are unable to hire those specialists in the district. Occupational therapy is a position that Milton has never privately employed in my 21 years here. The draw of clinical work and the employment hourly rate in clinical, school districts really can't compete with that. And the amount of services that we need in any given year can ebb and flow. So sometimes we would need 1 occupational therapist, sometimes we would need 1.5 occupational therapists. So that's one area where at least Milton has steadily contracted out for. When we look at contracting agencies, it is an area that we can negotiate. And when I show you some numbers a little bit later on from the IU compared to some outside providers, I'll go into that a little bit more in depth. So we provide some programming, but we also need to contract out for some of our services. The next slide gives you some basic information about special education. PIMS report, which is an area that Courtney spends a lot of time on. There is a report called the December 1 child count. That's a snapshot in any given year on how many students qualify for special education in the school district. So this year we're at 353, which is a tick up from years past. But in my tenure as supervisor of special ed, director of special ed, we've been as low as the 330s and we've been as high as the 380s. From a perspective or percentage through Our district compared to the state, we're right where we're supposed to be in the 16 to 18% range. So we are not underrepresenting students with disabilities, but we're not over identifying as well. So we're pretty steady there. Gifted support child count is at 25. We are intensely trying to increase that number through our child find. But gifted money is also included in the general ed budget for regular education, as well as some additional funding within the special education budget. A little information there on caseload numbers. By law, certain teachers of certain disability categories are restricted to the number of students they can have on their caseload. Depending on the disability category, it could be as low as 8 students. It could be as high as 60 students if you're looking at speech support. So you may see a classroom with 1 teacher and 4 or 5 students. That is likely an area where we have disability categories that have a very low number that's allowable. And as supervisors of special education, that is watched throughout the year and anticipated for the following year. Are we within those regulations? Are we able to decrease staffing, or do we need to increase staffing based on those numbers? The next slide is special ed revenue that is anticipated for next school year. We do receive 2 types of local revenue. One is actually a federal grant, but it is a pass-through grant, which comes through the IU, so it's categorized as local. Those IDEA federal funds pay for some of our teachers and most of our special education paraprofessionals, and it's anticipated that $380,000 will be the revenue coming in for next school year. Local is tuition from other districts. Currently, we have 4 students from the Lewisburg area school district. So we, at the end of the year, will have the tuition for those 4 students. It's anticipated that 2 of those students will be graduating. So as of right now, we are anticipating 2 students from out of district returning next year to our programs. Our state special ed subsidy, this is a number that Derek just increased by, I think it was 1.6 million, 1.68, I think, when I initially did this, and we've just moved it up to 1,720,000. So a little bit of an increase there. And Mrs. Kessler asked about our access funds. That is considered federal funding. That is something the district chooses to do. When students who qualify for special education get certain medical-based services, for example, nursing services, speech therapy, occupational therapy, that service that the school district employee provides can be submitted to medical assistance, and the school district can get reimbursement for that money. That money then must be only spent in the area of special education. So this revenue that we get is earmarked to improve or to provide certain services or items for students in special education. So that is an anticipated revenue of about $2.3 million for next year. If you go to the next slide, you will see our proposed budget for next year is 6.6 million in special education. So when we talk about unfunded or underfunded areas by local, state, and federal, special education certainly is one of those areas. We do see in the current budget a 7.88% increase from last year's numbers. We'll talk a little bit about why that is as I move forward, but almost 79% of that is salary and benefits, which is contracted. And, you know, if we stay with the same number of staff in the department, you know, we know that's going to increase based on the CBA and the handbooks that have been approved. The other 21% is out-of-district placements, which tends to be our highest area. You know, a student's out-of-district tuition can be anywhere from $17,000 a year to $510 a day, which gets you up into the $70,000-$80,000 mark. And then when you calculate in $80 to $130 an hour for related service and $20,000 for transportation, one student could be well over $100,000 a year. Related services, again, we have to contract out for some of our students or for some services, even when those students are in our district. And again, that's a financial decision of whether or not we can hire our own, or we can, or we need to contract out to medical-based providers for those services. And then some of the more variable expenses, which would be supply budgets for teachers, conference and travel, that certainly we can adjust based on where we need to. If we need to decrease in that area, that would likely be the area that we would be able to touch. So it's important for me to keep track of data. I've been doing this since I took the position in 2013. The next few slides show special ed data over time, both in our students and our financial. If you go to the next slide, Dwayne, you will see students by disability category. So as I said, there are many disability categories in Pennsylvania a student can qualify for. What you're seeing in this first slide is students qualifying under specific learning disability, speech language impairment, other health impairment, which is a medical-based disability category, but that medical diagnosis impacts access to or ability to progress in the educational setting. So it could be something such as diabetes, it could be ADHD, it could be depression, it could be anxiety. That's kind of a catch-all for medical-based diagnosis that negatively impact the education of the student. Emotional disturbance, intellectual disability, which historically has been called mental retardation, and autism. I put all of these disabilities on one slide because these are our higher incidence disability categories. As you can see, our students with specific learning disabilities has declined over time. This group of students typically have academic issues. So no disabilities that can be seen overtly when you look at a student, or you would necessarily see in the classroom if you would walk in. These are not students with behavioral problems. These are not students with physical disabilities. These are students who just need academic support to progress through the school setting. With the decrease of those students qualifying under specific learning disability, you will see an increase in some other areas. So it's not as if we are bringing in, or we have lower special education counts. We actually have the same number, but they have more complex needs. So you see the increase over time in other health impairments. Those students can have a lot of behavioral issues in the classroom, attention issues, need emotional support. We've seen a rise in students with intellectual disabilities. Over time, we've seen some ebb and flow with students with emotional disturbance. And we certainly have seen an uptick in students coming into our district with autism. And again, when you look at budget and staffing, when you have students with more complex needs, the individualized education plan that we're developing is more comprehensive. There are more service providers, there are more teachers involved, and the cost per student increases, even if they're staying within our buildings. Next slide are what we would consider our low incidence. Students with hearing impairment, orthopedic impairments. So if you look at the y-axis, the vertical axis, you'll see that we're talking about numbers of kids under 10, as opposed to the last slide where we had numbers into the 100s. So again, you know, a small number of kids, but complex needs, complex IEPs being written, and multiple supports in place for those students to be successful. Any questions there? The next two slides, again, it's a lot of data here, but what I want you to take a look at on the left-hand side, these are the locations that we have students in out-of-district placements. Some of them we control and some of them we don't. If a student is criminally charged and is placed through the judicial system into a residential facility, we did not do that placement. We did not make that decision, but we do have to pay the educational bill for that student, regardless of where that student is placed. We also have students in mental health placements, partial hospitalization programs. We don't make that placement either. We might recommend it, but that is a process that's done through the medical system. That is a process that has to be covered by medical insurance. But again, if a student is placed in a partial hospitalization program, we don't pay for the psychiatric piece of it, but we do pay for the educational component of that program, and we do pay for the transportation of that. So not all of these placements are special ed programming placements, but even if the school district doesn't initiate it or doesn't have the approval process, we do play the educational component for those students. What I provided to you is 2012-13, and then all the way to 2022-23. I took some middle years out. Dwayne, if you go to the next slide, what I want you to take a look at, if you will, is the last line. When I took over in special education 2012-2013, we had 48 students in out-of-district placements when I did this presentation. I can tell you it was actually 52 when I started. And we made great efforts over the years to start our own programs here. It was the idea of bringing our Panthers home and not contract out so much into IU programs, other school district programs, and privately run programs. And you can see over the years that we have been able to keep that number under 20 consistently. So when we look at our out-of-district placements this year, and Misty can talk about that and why some of that uptick has occurred from last year to this year. I just want to kind of normalize that number that we're at right now, 18, and that we were there in 1920. And if you go back to 12-13, we were up close to 50 when this presentation was done. Any questions there? Any questions about out-of-district placements?
Just a comment on this year's number of 18.
Yes.
Lucky, it's low.
We do have 4 kids on waiting lists. Dr. Weaver, I know you understand the mental health field and the placements in special education. You know, there's limited seats and a lot of districts that have kids that are in need.
The acuity of the symptoms that we're seeing from kiddos these days and the efforts being made to keep them at home are great efforts, but the acuity is very high and it's impacting the education of so many others. We're lucky to be sitting at 18 because other people aren't.
And we're seeing extraordinary behaviors at a younger age. You know, I share at times that the diagnosis of bipolar disorder was something when I was in the mental health field before I went into education was only for adults. You know, was only a diagnosis provided after, you know, a pretty long period of time of observation. And now we have 5-year-olds coming in with that diagnosis and medicated. It's just the new normal. I will share one situation. The other factor we don't control is students moving into our school district, both families and foster placements. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a student move in. And after the review of records, the building level admin came to us in central office and said, the student can't come in. There was safety concerns, charges pending too on strangulation of a family member as well as a girlfriend. So we made the placement. So not anticipated, very difficult to budget for. We often say special ed budget is only good on the day that we do it. I missed a budget meeting today for, this could be not updated now. So, we recognize the fiscal impact that these out-of-district placements have. And we have to, do right by kids and make sure that they are in programs where they will get help and get better, because eventually they're coming back to us. But we also recognize the impact this, one placement can have. So it's a difficult position. I've been in Misty's shoes for many years, and I know it keeps people up at night, when we have those tough decisions to make. So if we move to the next slide, again, when you looked at 2013-14, when I came in as supervisor of special education, we were almost at $900,000 just to the IU a year for out-of-district placements. So, this is 10 years ago. And we were also placing a few kids in other LEAs, so other school districts. Sometimes they had a specialized program that we didn't have. Or if we are having difficulty with a student in our program, we will look to another district program. One, they're cheaper. And sometimes having a student in a different mix of kids or with a different setting and new teachers can kind of help regulate whatever behaviors we're trying to cope with. And again, the goal is always to have our kids come home, come back to our home buildings, but we need to make sure that they're making progress in their educational program. And if that doesn't mean that it's with us, then that doesn't mean it's with us. But you'll see over the years, as we developed our own programs and we started autistic support classrooms, multiple disability support classrooms, emotional support classrooms, you see that orange bar come down and down and down. That was a really, it was a great thing to see. Our kids were eating lunch with their neighbors. Our kids were out on the playground with their neighbors. They weren't getting on a van or a bus and driving, 20, 30 miles to another program. Did we increase staff at that time? Yes. So we saw some budgetary increases, but overall, the special education budget did stabilize. I remember the one year that we couldn't qualify for special education referendum exceptions. And I was like, wow, who would have thought that would ever happen? But over, looking again at 2018-19, you can see things start upticking again. And our placements at New Story, which are really, placements for our most severe students who have emotional issues or autism. We've had to do a few placements there. But again, if you look at where we are today compared to where we were in 2013-14, we're still in a better spot than we were there. The next slide shows the same type of overview, but those related services. The IU was our primary provider for occupational therapy, social work, physical therapy, and in 2015-16, I negotiated a contract with what was Hope Enterprises at that time. They're now UPMC. And we got, services that the IU was charging for $110 an hour. We were getting it at $70 to $80 an hour. Right now, I use about $130 an hour, and we're still under $100 an hour with UPMC. We also look at some other areas, some other providers, and see if we can get a better rate. But number one, we're very happy with the services provided by UPMC. Our parents are happy with the services that are provided, and they are much more cost effective than the services that we were getting from the IU at the time. So a little bit of spending over time there. Next slide compares Milton's special education costs per student. This slide shows cost per student when you are looking at the hundreds and 200s, so the salaries and the benefits. And as you can see, Milton is right smack in the middle. It's about 11% of our operating budget, and is coming in at $11,994 per student. So, comparing ourselves to other districts for the 2021 school year, this is most recent that we can get out of Forecast 5. Again, we're in a good spot. We aren't one of the top, and we certainly aren't one of the bottom. Some of those lower numbers make me concerned, how they can service kids with that little staff. And then the last slide is similar. It looks at our programs. So the 1200s, the 2100s, and the 2700s. So our special programs, our support services, and then transportation. And again, you will find Milton, below middle cost per student. So again, I don't see us even, looking at size wise that we are an outlier with our special education spending. Misty, is there anything you want to add as the current supervisor?
So the only thing that we talked about that you didn't mention was, as we are doing the early intervention things, as we are looking at kindergarten registration, there is a possibility that we'll have to change some things. I'm not looking to add a staff member, but we may look at those caseload numbers and rearrange some people to best meet the needs of the kids that are coming in as well. I think that's the only thing that we had actually talked about that you didn't cover. Were there any other questions?
So
one request, recommendation, next year, I would suggest we try again for the elementary CSDBH program. I was asked why we didn't apply this year, and my response was because you already denied us. And the response was, if you want it, apply every year till you get it.
I had the application partially done and I got sick. So that's the real reason the application didn't go in on time. We did consider the high school as well, just because the data with the reorg, because of the moving a 5th grade over to White Deer, our data actually looked better because we moved 5th grade over. So my thought was to apply for the high school. And I unfortunately got sick and it didn't go in. But yes, I agree. We will continue to apply for that. Thank you.
Great.
Anyone else?
So I think sitting in this seat and looking at all of you, I think one of the things that, I want you to hear from me, and I've had this conversation, whether it was with administrators in this room or with board members, this is one of the more difficult areas of our budget. I appreciate the comment because the acute, that is a great word, because the severity and what we're seeing in kids, whether it's COVID or whether it's just the world we're living in, being honest with all of you, one of my staple lines as an elementary principal was always, unfortunately, we're not seeing kindergartners come in more prepared each year. They're coming in less prepared each year. So we are up against it. We are up against more severe cases of things. Here's where it gets difficult is those numbers, those increases in kids going out of district. I have watched it this year and it is evident it was happening in years past, but just being very clear and transparent. We will do everything we can. We will work together as a team. We will work with each principal, looking at their building and the needs. I assure you of that. But unfortunately, and we just had to do it recently, that increased the budget dramatically. But I also believe we need to look at our staff. We need to look at our classrooms. To be honest with all of you, I bet you there were people that tell you we should do more. But unfortunately, we'll take this budget and throw it 1.5 more, if we did all of that. And we can't. Legally, we cannot. But just please know we take it very seriously, but it is a huge impact. At any given moment, in 2 weeks' time, we could increase the budget by $150,000 where we never expected it because of kid and their needs. And I will not, and that's what I want to be transparent is, I will not, after sitting with this team, and that recommendation comes from a group of our team that says this student can't be here, I'm going to listen to them and we're going to make that recommendation because that's what's best for that child, first of all, and the rest of our district because there's a need there. So it is a significant issue for us, but please know that's where I stand on this. I know it's a significant budget impact, but we've got to look at that and we've just got to be, we can't be prepared because you never know. I think that's a great comment, right? A special ed budget's as good as the day it's sitting there. Outside of that, it can adjust by $100,000 in 2 days. And you don't want it to, but we take it seriously. I just want everybody to hear that. But it's tough. It's a very tough decision. So thank you for your time on that, both of you.
Mrs. Girton, Mrs. Harris. We're going to move on to regular education and Dr. Kirkpatrick, please.
Evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening, and thank you for adjusting the agenda so our full team could be here. We are taking a team approach tonight, so the principals are going to join me in presenting some of the material for you. In the agenda for this presentation, we're hoping to address programming. Specifically, I want to highlight 2 areas that were questions from last week. One of them being what are we doing with instructional coaches and are they still necessary? And the other being the question about conferences and travel. So I'll highlight those specifically. Outside of that, I'll talk about professional development, and then at the end of the presentation, do a budget breakdown for you, including our grants and funding. So we'll begin this evening with some information about elementary. This is not designed to be all-inclusive, but basically just highlight some areas of priority for us and some areas that we're focusing on specifically. So who's up first?
I think I'm up first. We are taking a look at elementary Spanish as an option as we realign our offerings and our alignment just for K-5 over the next couple of years. One of the things that the team has been in conversation with going back to last summer is, would it be an appropriate move to pivot our reading special into a Spanish special? Part of this, there's some really good research out there suggesting that learning a secondary language is good for not just acquisition of that language, but also acquisition of English, both at a spoken level and also at a reading level. So there's lots of really good research out there that can be shared as we move along. It aligns with these career development standards that Milton does really well with in the IU. When you stack us up against every school district in the IU, our career development numbers coming out of the elementary level look really, really good. This is another thing that aligns naturally with that. In addition to some of these critical thinking and problem solving skills that we all want to teach our kids at every level, they're in there. They're embedded in these programming offerings. And then I think important for tonight's discussion is this is a budget neutral thing. Our reading specialist who has been teaching the special is no longer employed. She took a job in another district. So we do have an opening. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick has found a way to use title funds to basically justify hiring if that's the way that we go with that. Again, we are just in the formulation process. There's been no hard and fast decisions that are made, but we are kicking the ball down this road. And I think we're on board. I don't know if you guys have, again, this is planning stage is not solidified, but if there are any questions at this time, I invite them.
I love the idea. I just want to say, I think it's fantastic. I remember in 5th grade, we were offered German, I think French and Spanish as to try them out. And I minored in Spanish in college, and it was super helpful to come up through the language, especially now. I mean, if you move to Florida, for instance, my favorite place, bilingual is a huge, advantage in applying for jobs. So it's actually almost mandatory there.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Thank you for that feedback, Lindsay.
When are we starting this possibly next year?
Pardon me?
Would this possibly be next year then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it would be for all of our.
Yes. Yes. Actually, the high school teachers and I met, oh gosh, several weeks ago, and we thought about what could the curriculum look like, K-5. So we put some outlines together, and we're super excited about the possibilities. And so we're ready. We're ready right now. We could be.
My daughter personally would love this. She was already counting to 10 with one of her little friends at school that speaks Spanish. And, she said it terribly wrong. But I think she would really enjoy learning it. I think it's great.
But taking it to a surface level, right? A lot of our kids, when they walk in the door each morning, there's two things, right? Our elementary kids do. They love their teacher. They want to be in their classroom. Number two is, what special do I have today?
Oh, yeah.
That's the question. Who do I have today? This is the kind of stuff that excites them because it's different. It's neat. They're excited. They want to go to music, art, Spanish. Like, again, I'm not even going with, we can get into the research, but a kid walking in, like, that's what they get excited about. What's new today?
And you can easily teach them. I mean, Back to the Future, like I had Spanish from 1st to 8th grade, conversational Spanish. It was fun.
Exactly right.
It's exciting.
It is in classes where we do have students who are native Spanish speakers, it sort of happens informally because the other kiddos just want to learn and the teachers want to learn. And so, but it'll be great to have it more official in the curriculum. Moving on, then, I know we have discussed this or shared this idea previously. So who is taking on kindergarten badges tonight?
This is also me, and then I'm done for
Okay.
tonight. So kindergarten badging, this is a pretty exciting development that was brought to us by the kindergarten team, kind of organically, trying to find meaningful ways to assess our students, where they come in, and also, where we want to see them go by the end of 1st grade. Essentially, it changes the grading system from a more traditional percentage letter grade system and breaks it down to the skill level, and thus becomes more appropriate for meeting kids regardless of where they are in the skill spectrum, giving them feedback, immediate feedback, but also feedback during report card times. I know our kindergarten team has been hard at work trying to find a system that works, that does acknowledge kids' skill acquisition, but also fits in with the timeline of report cards and reporting those to parents in a way that is accessible, that parents will be able to understand. I know that Dr. Kirkpatrick has been in conversations with just how to communicate this information once it's all we've pressed play on it and we're moving forward with it, how to communicate it effectively to parents, as Mr. Stetler, Mr. Slater, and myself have been as well, just so everybody is informed about this. We have had some consultation from some other districts who have adopted this. It fits in with what a lot of neighboring districts are doing as far as their kindergarten reporting. We see this when kids move into the district from schools like Lewisburg, Shamokin. They have these systems kind of already in place, or some version of them. We're not reinventing the wheel, but I think we're opening up the conversation to just make it as appropriate as possible, so that when a kid leaves kindergarten, they have this many skills met, which can be more meaningful than my kid has a 91. What does that mean? So I think that there's lots of good developmental conversations that are happening with that.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. We are looking at coming to you on April 4th to provide a much more in-depth presentation for you. The teachers want to come and share with you some of the things that they've been working on. So we'll hope to have that be more specific on April 4th. That's okay.
Just real quick, is this in place of the actual, our numeric grades then for kindergarten?
I'm sorry, Lindsay.
Is this a different grading system then
Yes.
that we use? So didn't we just get rid of the 1, 2, 3, 4s to go back to percentages, right?
So yes, within the last 3 school years, we did make the change from a standards-based report card to a numeric-based report card in the elementary world for transparency and to make sure that we had clear conversations with parents. This is not going to resemble standards-based grading. It's more of a checklist with, the letter A, B, C, D, the letters of the alphabet, uppercase and lowercase, so parents can see right on there what students can identify, what they can make. The same with numbers, the same with other skills. So it's not, I don't want to say hidden like it was with standards-based, but we weren't able to have a rich conversation under standards-based between the community understanding and the teaching understanding. It wasn't a lot of common language. This is another step to build common language between our parents and guardians and our teaching team so that there's a real assessment and understanding of what our students can actually do.
Right.
So once a student masters something, earn back. Incorporated, giving a student once they know what points they outline. So we're also differentiating the students at their level, where they are, and they're low, they're above, etc.
Isn't that kind of what our assessments do though? Like when I'm just looking, like I'm thinking of my kiddo's Sapphire and I'm going on and looking at the assessment scores and stuff, and you can see if they're on grade average, above grade average, you know what I mean? Like where they're falling on that scale. And then on our report cards, it does list like what reading level they're at and everything like that. So I feel like that's an assessment itself. I just feel like if we do too much of this, and it's just my 2 cents, so I'm just throwing it out there. But I feel like if we're going to change this kind of reporting and then go to the different one in first grade, I understand what you're saying because you want to make it so the parents understand where the child's at. Also, how do we ascertain if they pass or fail? Because for me, I'm seeing 100 and I'm like, yay, we're good. I know we mastered all 67 sight words and we're moving on to first grade. I don't know. I feel like it might be overwhelming if it's too much. I like the idea of a little bit more feedback for the parents, but I feel like if you're going to give this whole long synopsis, it's going to be a lot for people to take a quick glance and say, okay, last 3 grades are this, we're good. We're still moving forward and progressing. And I think our kindergarten team does a fantastic job. I mean, personally, I've had nothing but good interactions and feedback from, hey, this is what we need to work on, or hey, this is going well, or I think they're good at communicating.
Next month. Just looking at the big three, I guess sort of neat. We're not changing our curriculum. That's I hear you. You see it.
I'm open for ideas. I am, I'm
I
just.
also think what's neat is them coming and talking to you as a board is critical because here's what we've done. And when I say we, I'm not saying Milton, because you have to keep in mind my experience with this. We have tried to use standards-based and we've tried to use grades in elementary for the past, 10, 15 years. And we've struggled to report to parents. We thought we were, parents come back, what do you do? I feel like this, I saw it on the kindergarten's face, teacher's face. I feel like they're finally being heard with this kind of stuff. They're putting their language to this. Again, when they come next week, ask them those questions of, I just feel like we're finally, instead of just being kind of the state kind of, or the old school mentality of how we've done this is that next level. I've done my best, and I told Dr. Patrick this, to stay out of curriculum things year 1 here because it's my wheelhouse. I went to this meeting and I should not have ever been there because I got so excited because I could see it on their faces, the teachers' faces of this is where they want to go. So I think it's a great question, but I think it's a great conversation next week or next month when they're here to really talk about it and see their excitement and why.
Just one more question, I promise, and that's it. I'll wait till next week. But I'm just wondering, why are we only looking at kindergarten though? If this is a great system, why are we only looking at kindergarten and not? I just feel like it's going to be a breakdown of the first year we have a whole stack of papers of this is awesome, that's awesome, we got to work on that. And next year we're like 98, 99, Is there a reason that we're focusing so much on kindergarten?
It's a place to start, really, a place to start. Not to say that we won't consider that or we won't think about that for first grade. Other districts have done that, transitioned from one grade to another. but this is a start for us. We'll be able to share some of the tools that they've developed so far. I think that'll provide a better, more clear picture of kind of what it looks like and what the teachers are thinking about.
Okay.
And some of the research behind it as well. All right, moving on to phonemic awareness and phonics. And as you know, this is just one part of learning to read, but we did want to highlight some of the programs that we are using at the elementary. Is that you, Mr. Settler?
It is, yes. Good evening, board. Our team felt that it was really an area we wanted to focus on this evening to talk about early literacy, phonemic awareness and phonics initiatives within the elementary school. Research continues to be so clear that promoting early literacy outcomes is one of the key indicators for success for our students. The more that we can invest and do in this area, the better off our students will be as they learn to read and eventually, hopefully, read to learn, building that intrinsic love of reading. Our classroom teachers, our reading specialist team all do a fantastic job with these different interventions to help make sure that regardless of what level a student comes in at, we can push them along towards progress at their own individualized level. The first area I wanted to touch on this evening is Foundations. This is a K-3 structured phonics spelling and handwriting curriculum. We implemented at both Bacher and White Deer Elementary School. This is where we get activities such as cursive from. It's engaging. It uses multisensory where students are tapping out digraphs. They're learning how to dissect parts of words, put them together, learn different rules so that when they come across words that they're not familiar with, they have the tools in their toolbox to attempt that word and to use their skills to approach that language and approach those reading concepts. Along with that, within the last 2 years, we found our reading specialist team that we needed more decodable text in our elementary world. We needed an ability to have, for students to access information, access text, where they have the skills to break down words to determine meaning. 80% of the words in our geodes text are decodable, which means that they're not trick words. They're words that our students have been given the skills to break down and understand the concepts. The other piece of geodes that are really neat are that they are nonfiction texts. So our students are getting engaged to real world concepts such as butterflies, trees, things that they can go home and share with their parents and, be able to create that homeschooling and excitement as well, allowing for that deepening of understanding. Along with that, we've also implemented Heggerty for the last 4 years, I believe, Dr. Kirkpatrick. These are short 12-minute lessons that we're utilizing in grades K through 2, where students learn how to break words apart, put them together. They're consistently practicing their ability to build that meaning from words so that they are able to access early skills of reading and understanding, making them stronger students overall. The final piece that I wanted to discuss this evening is our Wilson Reading Program. It is a piece that we have in place for students in our MTSS process that have moved to Tier 3. That is our highest level of intervention within the MTSS process. These are small group interventions. It's not large group like the others in the classroom, where our reading specialist team are working with students on decoding and encoding words, taking words apart, putting them together, the different skills that they need to build that capacity for reading to understand. We've seen a lot of success early on with Mrs. Marzial at White Deer. I know our reading specialist team at Bacher are using it as well. We're seeing fantastic gains in our students' capacity to decode, encode, and then eventually be able to read passages. So this is fantastic work that's being undertaken by our reading team, by our classroom teacher team, and really one of the most important pieces of our work at the elementary level.
Thank you, Mr. Settler. All right, moving on to science and social studies, we want to highlight some of the work that's happening at the elementary level. Is that you, Mr. Settler?
It is me as well. It was announced last year that we are getting some new standards in science in Pennsylvania, which is very exciting. The next generation science standards have existed at the federal level for many years now. Pennsylvania has not updated to reflect those standards, but we are going to be implementing the new PA standards for science, technology, engineering, environmental literacy, and sustainability, known as STEELS. We learned about this early last year, and Dr. Kirkpatrick got our elementary team together very quickly. We began actually working last summer, well ahead of many other districts, to make sure that our curriculum is going to be responsive to these changes. It gave us a great opportunity to begin looking at our curriculum crosswalk to make sure that we understood areas that we needed to shift K through 5 and what we were covering, and also to make sure that we didn't have any duplicity across the board, making sure that what we're doing in kindergarten does not also reflect what we're doing in first grade and so on. We have continued that work throughout this school year using our professional development days as well as a number of PLC cycles to make sure that our teacher teams have adequate time to wrap their heads around what's expected under the new standards and to design common assessments that we can then use to drive our instruction, making sure that our students are in the best position possible. These standards are going to be in place July 1, 2025. So we still have a fair amount of time, but it's going to be here before we know it. And we're really making sure that we're in the best position possible for our teaching team and our students to be successful. One other shift that I want to mention is that right now students are assessed in science in 4th grade in the elementary world. With the new PSSA in 2025 representing the STEEL standards, that assessment will move to 5th grade. So our 4th graders in the 2023-24 school year, 2024-25 school year will be assessed in 4th grade science, and then 25-26 will be assessed in 5th grade. So we will have a group of students that will be assessed under 2 different groups of science standards, but we'll navigate that as it comes.
Thank you, Mr. Stettler. And finally, elementary, we are looking at summer programming. Mr. Slater, is that you? All righty.
This has been a program that we've implemented about 15 years ago. It's something unique to our district. What we do is we currently have 100 students registered for kindergarten right now. There are 69 students registered for Bacher Kindergarten and 31 of those students for White Deer. What we do is we offer them the opportunity using data, using our Dial 4, which is when kids come in and they go through the registration process, they're screened using the Dial 4. And from that data and the screening, we invite students to attend that program in the summer. We're looking to offer this program in concurrent with the other programs that we have, the summer school and the bridging to first. But during Jumpstart, students come. You normally have kindergarten teachers that facilitate the program, and it does that exactly what it says. It gives them a jumpstart to the kindergarten experience. Once we send out those invitations for the scores, what we get back, we normally historically have had 30 to 40 students participate in the Jumpstart program. So that is something that is discussed during registration, and then we will make, in the month of May, reach out to families and invite them to attend the program. In addition to that, on teacher recommendation and using student data, our kindergarten students that will be going to first grade have an opportunity to participate in a very similar program. We talk about retention, we talk about ways to keep kids engaged over the summer, and regression is a huge issue. So making sure that students that would benefit from having still some kind of structure educational program occur over those, over the month of July, a little bit into August, it just gives them what it says. It builds that bridge from kindergarten to first grade and maintain the skills that they need to be successful. MISD program that the special ed department runs, which is required. It is written into their IEPs. Students are invited, but are not required to come. It is strongly encouraged. They're all offered the opportunity to attend extended school year ESY, and those invitations go out as well. These programs that I'm speaking to will occur at White Deer Elementary with the Bacher's renovation and things going on in the building. Over the last couple of years, we've held these programs at White Deer. We make sure that they're fully staffed and administrators are on hand to be able to address the 100+ students that are in the building to to be there for these things. They are served a healthy breakfast and a lunch. And that's Ashley's in conjunction with the Y have created this opportunity for them to eat breakfast and lunch while they're there. Summer school is something we've implemented probably about 7 years ago, I believe. Different grade levels, but we do run that for 2nd to 5th grade students. Transportation and food are provided for those programs. The summer schools, we need about 7 to 8 teachers to staff these programs where these students are recommended by their teachers. They are students that could possibly be retained. There are students that are, needing that intervention or additional practice over the summer. I talked about regression, and these are students that teachers recommend, not required to come, but we do invite them and speak with their parents and send out mailings to invite them to participate in the programs. We're looking for summer school and Jumpstart and Bridging to occur July 10th to August 3rd. It's approximately 16 days. The 4th of July occurs on a Tuesday, and we found it that when we try to hold a program over that week, we do not, especially happening on a Tuesday, we don't get very good attendance. So that's why we're looking at going from July 10th to August 3rd. The last program that impacts students over the summertime is the STEAMS Summer Camp. This is offered right now. The middle school and Bacher Elementary have STEAMS camps going on after school that is run by the IU. As I said, they hold a summer camp, and that camp this year, as it was last year, will be held in the middle school where they do various activities. And these students are selected and recommended by the program, parents, and as well as administrators. That's it.
Question about the STEAMs. I understand how it's funded, and that's why it's only open to Bacher students. Is there any way we can make that district-wide available?
So, Mr. Frederick, I have continually voiced my displeasure over how the grant was written. They are very aware that when they renew their grant, I would very much appreciate if they could include Union County so that our students at White Deer could benefit as well. It's a tremendous program, and I share your wish that we could offer it to all students.
Absolutely.
Good point, Mr. Frederick. Just one thing to add about Jumpstart to kindergarten. If a student does not necessarily qualify based on dial scores, if a family would like their child to attend Jumpstart for other reasons, other than academic, social reasons, or just having them have the opportunity to get acclimated to school, we don't turn anyone away. So they're welcome to contact us and we'll sign them up.
Dr. Kirkpatrick, I just wanted to let you know that actually next week, I'm actually meeting with people from the IU and their early childhood program to talk about individual students and opportunities, and Jumpstart is one of the things that's on the table for some of these kids that may benefit from that who don't necessarily pop on that. So there's some nice things happening between local organizations that I think are pretty exciting. They reached out to Mr. Stetler, Mr. Slater, and myself, and so we're going to go and meet with them and hope to build up some students for this program beyond just what's on paper there. So that's good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Decker. The other thing that I wanted to mention relative to summer school is that at least currently, while we still have ARP ESSER 7%, ARP ESSER 7% is funding after school programming as well as summer school programming. So we have that for at least another year, as long as the money lasts.
Can I ask a real quick question about STEAMs? Other than poor White Deer can't go there, unfortunately. But is there also an income limit for the district? I had a few different people ask me, I mean, myself included, I applied the first day thinking it's just a fun summer, and I was denied. So I just didn't know if there's an unpublished income limit because it was sent out last year on like an email, like, hey, apply for STEAMs. And I reached out to the contact at CSIU and they said, oh, I'm sorry, the application was denied. It was the first day. So I'm like, you couldn't run out of funding on the first day. I truly was just looking for like something fun to entertain my children.
I've not heard that before. Has anyone, I've not heard that there's any kind of.
I don't know if you want to way as
Oh,
well. There's no
but
income
I-
to my knowledge.
I do remember there were grade levels they were focusing on one year and turned someone down based on grade level. I'll defer to Derek on that one.
Continuing on.
We won't get
Moving
into the
on.
details of that, but I can share that part of the selection process is it first goes to returning students. Then after returning students, it goes to siblings of those students. And I do know it fills up extremely fast. So what happens is they do kind of like a pre-registration for those students who are returning or their siblings are joining. So I know when my boys went to the summer camp last year, and they've gone, my older son's gone for multiple years. He said that it filled up like instantly, and that there just weren't spots open for a lot of the kids, unfortunately. So that may have been what happened. Is it just, yeah, it just fills up so quickly, but no, yeah, no income limit, nothing like that. There is a like a behavioral piece, like they do have to be kids that aren't getting in trouble in school, like good standing with this district, all that stuff. But no income based selection.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to enrollment. This is elementary enrollment, and as we know, we've talked multiple times about staffing and the impact on the budget. So I wanted to provide for you the overview of where we are currently with enrollment at Bacher Elementary and White Deer Elementary School. And as Dr. Bickhart has mentioned previously, the plan for next year is to keep fifth grade at White Deer, just like it is now. So this is what the breakdown looks like. Grade level teams, as well as the enrollment in those grade levels, and what is the class size across the number of teachers who are in that grade level at that school. So you can take a look at what this is as of the March enrollment report. Any questions about that? This is similar to the way that I presented it last year to give an overview of that. And then in thinking ahead to what may be a possible realignment, as we've mentioned that numerous times on the next page, what I did was provide for you an estimated, and we used the number 144, Dr. Bickhart's recommendation based on a fancy formula he has, I think. We're estimating that in the 24-25 school year, the estimated numbers for kindergarten and first grade are both at 144. Obviously, we don't know what that enrollment will look like. So that's the number that we utilized, shifting the numbers currently kindergarten through grade 3 down to grades 2 to 5. So bringing those numbers from the previous slide, you can see what the class sizes would look like if all grade levels were combined and we had those specific numbers at each grade level. So then we have the option, right? We have the question of, well, will kindergarten and first grade be at White Deer, or will fourth and fifth grade be at White Deer? Will Bacher Elementary have second, third, fourth, and fifth, or will Bacher be focused on K to 3? So the breakdowns there, according to the scenario, kind of give you a picture of what that could look like by not only just grade level, but what will class sizes, if all of those teachers at that grade level were in the same school, how would that impact class size? And how would that allow us to shift or potentially reduce some staffing at the elementary level? So if you noticed on the previous slide, we had 43 total classroom teachers at both schools. Bringing them together, there could possibly be a reduction of 2. And in thinking about that fifth grade class, because it is a very large bump, once that fifth grade class goes to the middle school, that could potentially be another reduction in the number of fifth grade teachers. What questions do you have about those scenarios right now?
So one comment, possibly what you're looking at, the original packet we worked on this morning has the number 38. I think some of you were looking at that. That was just, we were recalculating and doing things. Our numbers just didn't add up initially. That is the correct document. We were just working through those numbers. Before you ask, well, I'll pause, ask questions and then, I'll comment afterwards. Anything regarding this slide that you feel needs to be answered?
For specialists, which alignment makes the most sense? K to 3 at Bacher or K and 1 at White Deer?
So Okay, I'll go there. Here's what I think where we're at. And I said this in February, and I'll let the team jump in then is, we wanted to show you those scenarios. Do we believe as a leadership team, I think cohesively, that we think realignment makes the most sense from a financial standpoint? No, educationally, and then it will help us financially because of consistency. I think where I want to look at you as a board, I said in April, we were going to have this as part of a discussion of getting out there to parents saying, here's the district's recommendation, let's talk. If I were to tell you that right now, sitting here, our recommendation would be scenario B, bringing K3 to Bacher for exactly what you're talking about, reading resources, especially all those kind of resources. We have everybody in one spot. That third grade age is that age where if you get to them and they're leaving, going to fourth grade and they're reading on level, that's a huge piece of this. So I think that's where we're standing.
From the budget standpoint, as if you split up those younger grade levels, then you may need extra specialists.
Your
Not so
reading,
much
reading
teachers.
could get a little,
We would still, we would still need the same number of specialists, right? We would just the way that they would be sort of scheduled across the number of classrooms. The big difference would be that, as Dr. Bickhart mentioned, the idea of front loading that reading support and putting that heavy emphasis on those earlier grades so that students would ideally, the goal being, be able to read by the time they leave third grade.
A or B doesn't matter to me. Putting them all together makes the most sense. So that's why I just asked.
but I do
Financially,
think
which was the better.
this is where I know you guys have discussed this. We want to be very clear to our families. I'm going to work with the principals to getting out to our fourth grade families in the next few weeks, a letter saying, hey, you'll be in fifth grade Bacher next year. We don't want it to happen where it was July again. We're not going to allow that to happen. But I also think when we come back together in April, let's create those questions. What do we want to start with at this level? And then when we go out to present to our families and say, come talk to us. Let's make sure we're hearing you. We can work on that. I would like a final decision by this board on realignment, whichever way we go, to be something we prioritize for next October. I think then that gives families time to be prepared. We share at the end of this school year. We come back at the beginning of the school year. We allow parents and anybody that has an opinion, we want to hear it, but then we can make those decisions based on all the facts.
Right now, our specialists, just to highlight that one more time, our specialists are covering 43 home, essentially homerooms. So they would still be able to, the same number of specialists we have right now would be able to cover the estimated 41 or estimated 40 classrooms.
My wonderful formula is simply, we get the third, fourth, and fifth, and we can rationalize that 24 is a number we can handle. That means 6 classrooms. That's where that number comes from, is if we just keep within that range, we'll see what happens. We're at what, 100 right now? Right, gentlemen?
Yes,
100.
100.
So 100. So we'll see where that goes. I know it always jumps.
That's pretty typical for this time of year, though. We were at 99. actually.
At 877, Dr. Patrick said it, 877-666 would be wonderful. It'd be 40. Is it possible it would be, 887-666 if we wanted to keep K and 1 low? But again, that's we present ourselves better options with class size when they're all together. And that's better financial decision-making.
All right, next we're going to move to have Mr. Scoggins, who's going to share some of the middle school priorities for us.
Good evening, everyone. The 5 bullets that you see on the slide this evening for the middle school kind of represent, as it impacts the middle school budget, the priorities that we want to focus on. And it really boils down to furnishings and instructional support resources. So the first 2 are the classroom desk and tables. If you take a walk around the middle school, you'll see in any classroom kind of a mix and match approach to some furniture that we have, some desks and tables. We took it upon ourselves to, at a district level, try to furnish classrooms with a standardized classroom set. And we made a commitment here in the middle school to keep that going. And we're almost complete with the 6th grade pods being furnished. We have one more classroom to go through, to be able to complete that. But as you're well aware, the cost of furniture has gone really high, along with the cost of getting it delivered has gone high as well. So those two things have kind of slowed that progress, but we still have a commitment to taking care of that across the middle school building. And that includes spaces like the library that you're in now. You can see that some of our furniture that we're using is everyday furniture for our students is really not meant for that. We have some fold-up tables that are only supposed to be used occasionally, but they're being used on a daily. So that needs some attention, and we'll continue to focus on that as well. Also, the second bullet point, as you heard Dr. Weaver mention, we have some programs. We're very fortunate in the middle school to have programs from DTAC. And one of those would be CSPBH, but really we're going to have a layered support for our students. And why that's on my slide as a priority as it pertains to budget is because we have to find space and outfit those spaces for those programs. Is very important to us to make sure that the privacy and confidentiality that those resources will provide for our students are met, and we'll continue to do that as well. And then the other three really kind of break down into either what we are teaching or how we are teaching our students in the middle school. Third bullet point is PVOS. Our teachers have taken a deep dive into that. That's a state platform that really allows us to take a look at students and their where they're at currently and where they can go. So our teachers have done a great job this year taking a dive into that and getting comfortable. But what that means in a budgetary sense is, if we're going to meet our kids truly at where they're at, we need to provide the resources within the budget to be able to provide for those students. And then the fourth bullet point that you see is the possible shift to a period schedule. This is, again, focused on meeting students where they're at and providing them the resources and the education that they need to be successful through the middle school. And that, again, boils down to providing them the resources that they need in those targeted, scheduled opportunities within a period schedule. And then lastly, you heard Mr. Stetler mentioning the STEELS curriculum that's coming our way as far as science goes. We are fortunate to have some teachers, science teachers in the middle school this year go to the initial training. So we're a couple of steps behind the elementary in terms of being ready, but our goal is for this coming year to focus our time and resources in that curriculum. And a byproduct of that will always be finding money in the budget to be able to provide for new curriculum and resources to teach that curriculum. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Scoggins. And then moving right into high school programming and priorities.
So the first thing up is our cyber education that I discussed at length the other week. So I think what I'll do, if you have any questions or anything after that presentation that you guys thought about since then, in reference to our cyber, our move to take our cyber courses into our in-house Canvas courses. If you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer that at this time.
The next two bullet points up there, I'll actually go to the third one first, the entrepreneurship, obviously presented about that for the past two meetings. So you guys understand that program for 23-24 is kind of the reimagining or the rebranding of our accounting program, going for that more kind of holistic approach towards business education while creating a new career tech ed program out of our existing faculty and staff. The second bullet is one that we're bringing up tonight and talking about because it will be a priority moving forward for multiple reasons, but I will talk about it, or I guess I should say have it officially on the board agenda at some point here, either in April or May, to be approved as a new program. But to give you guys an overview real briefly, over the past year and a half or so, there were several educators around the state that developed a task grid for a new CTE program that is called Education General. And the focus of the CTE program is, like any other comprehensive CTE programs, to try to get students ready in that specific pathway. In this case, it is education as a whole. It's to train teachers, at the high school level and prepare them for a post-secondary level. This is different than early childhood education, which still does have a focus in elementary education, but also in the pre-K and the daycare world as well. This is more focusing on that upper level elementary and then through middle and high school education. The beauty of this program is that, in all career and tech ed programs, you have to have certified teachers in order to teach that. The beauty of the education program is that basically every single teacher that we have on staff is certified to teach this program. And in essence, which I do want to develop a little bit of presentation for you because we're at the very beginning stages, it just got approved last month through the Department of Education. We more or less already have existing courses in our course catalog that can be blended together to create this program. So between courses that we already have, as well as developing kind of an internship model within our own district, we do feel very confident that we can create this new CTE program, a brand new program with essentially zero overhead costs. When you're talking about impact to a budget, it's zero. It's courses that already exist, taught by teachers that we already have, developed into a curriculum that can completely and totally be immersed into what we already offer. So we're really excited about that. Not only because we can start a new program, and we do have several kids every year that leave us that want to go into the education field, but also, as you've heard over the past several years, there is a shortage of teachers in this state and in this country. So anything we can do to try to foster, a passion for students to go into that pathway, I think that, we're just helping ourselves in the grand scheme of things. So, and we're starting to see some of our alumni, want to come back to us, and work here. They go to local schools. They want to come back and student teach here. We have several that you guys have approved over the past several months. Don't even know if you realize it, that, our former graduates that are coming back and doing some substitute teaching with us. With the new law that was passed is, they get their 60 credits in college. They come back in winter break and spring break, and they're coming back in substitute teaching. So I think you can kind of see it there already. So we're excited about that. And moving forward with starting that program next year, hopefully. And then just real quick, the Diversified Occupations and Greenhouse Project, again, DO is a program we already have. Greenhouse Project is something that we've been talking about for multiple years now through our agriculture program. We received a $250,000 grant, Ed Job Training Grant, which in essence, correct me if I'm wrong, was, you can speak to it, Dr. Kirkpatrick, kind of how it came about.
It came about through the foundation, I believe. And then, so it was, I think Senator Gordner came
Senator
here
Gordner's gift to
and
us that
pledged
ended
the
up
money to
being a
us.
grant.
And then on the heels of that was this application process. And it took way too long for us to actually get that funding, but we finally did after, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 7 months or something. So
least.
now we're able to really start planning those, what we originally intended to do with it. We're able to start putting those pieces in place.
Which is helping with the salary and benefits of Diversified Occupations, the coordinator, as well as hopefully funding almost wholly a greenhouse project for our agriculture program. So a lot of details still to work out on that, but we actually have the money now, so we can move forward with seeing how we can make that happen. And then just to piggyback off to what Mr. Scoggins said, talking, brainstorming and looking at a possible shift to a period schedule to just overall better maximize our faculty and staff at the secondary level to meet the needs of our students.
Any questions for high school? Thank you, Andrew and Mike.
So I will challenge the board again, same conversation we have with realignment coming back in April. I think that possible shift to period schedule that you see between 6 through 12 is something we really need to ask questions, put together some information, share with families. I think it's There's a lot of, same thing we said with realignment, the educational benefits as leaders. I think we could share with you why we think that. I know that impacts families, it impacts teachers. We're having that conversation with them. But I also think if our goal also is to look at some financial pieces as we move forward, when you have period schedule, it probably allows your educators to do a little bit more. So how do we maximize that? So I know I said last week, I would look at kind of the amount of educators we've had. It's been pretty consistent from what I can see historically over the past 5-6 years, somewhere around 180, give or take here and there. I think these two things are those, when we look at budget savings without really destroying or eliminating programs or raising class size, I think we feel realignment and a new schedule may give us that opportunity. So we want to be clear and transparent beginning next month, share it with everybody, add to it, ask questions so we can make the same idea. I'd like to make that decision next October so families are prepared a year ahead. But please come with your questions as we explore this beginning next month.
I also just want to highlight the CTE for educators. There is a national teacher shortage. And there are a lot of advocacy efforts at the state and national level to address how to fix this. And the fact that we're able to offer CTE program for educators to support those national efforts is super cool. So we just talked about this the other day and came to it was like, oh my gosh, well, we can do it. We just need the OAC and we have the teachers in place. And so we're really excited about that. So I just wanted to mention that. All right. So now I'm shifting into fifth gear for the rest of the presentation to just go over some of these other things, including the budget. And I did, as I mentioned earlier, want to highlight, as because the question came up about conferences and travel, I wanted to provide you with an explanation of what all is happening. This is currently for this year. And then there are some conferences and travel represented in here that have been already submitted in terms of their approval form. So this is a breakdown. It is a breakdown that is either by most attended. So for example, we might have had a group of 10 teachers attend one of these conferences or groups, or essentially by big categories. So you can see the breakdown. I don't need to read over these one by one. However, if there are specific questions that you have, please feel free to ask. At the admin level, the 4525 would include conferences and travel for Dr. Bickhart, myself, principals, Mrs. Ham, who goes to the data summit at PDE and any kind of state conference. I'll just go through some of the big ones. The integrated learning conference is 5575. I think we have about 10 or 12 teachers who go to that. 4,100 of that is paid out of Perkins funds. And then the category at the bottom, student services, that includes autistic support, learning support, guidance, speech, gifted, and some admin as well. So do you have any specific questions about any of the items on the conference and travel? You can see what our totals are for this year for current spending on those items. On the next slide, what I did was provide for you a breakdown of substitute teacher costs based on, or not costs essentially, but just the numbers of substitutes that would be needed to cover some of the travel on the previous page. So you can see this breakdown by elementary, specialist, high school, middle school. Under elementary, where I talk about the number of elementary teachers who have been out for conferences this year, that number is 19. 5 of those were filled by an instructional coach. So that would have left 14 days, obviously, at substitute rate. And I mentioned under conference costs that the conferences those teachers went to were actually free. So the 2 big categories there, or 2 big topics, were the Invention Land curriculum, where teachers went to learn more about kind of a science and STEM curriculum. They got a lot of resources. I think some teachers actually got $2,500 for classroom supplies under that. And the other category is for the new science standards, as a couple of our principals mentioned, that we've had teachers who have attended the CSIU. Those sessions are free. The only thing that we're paying for is the sub. And likewise for the other ones that you see there. Some of these positions are not usually or may not be filled by a sub, but usually not. For example, our ESL teachers do not usually get subs to cover their classrooms. Some of the specialists like library or some of the elementary specialists may most likely have a special that's canceled for that time. Any questions about conferences or for substitutes? All right, there was a question last time about instructional coaches and what specific things are instructional coaches focusing on. So I provided two things for you. One, which was the slide to kind of break down those categories, but the coaches also thought it would be helpful if they made a brochure for you. So they made a brochure for you to also further outline some of the things that they're focusing on, complete with QR codes, so you can go here to these places, some areas on the website to further explain what they were working on in that particular project. So coaches are still very active in providing classroom teacher and student support. They've been working with me on the new science standards and other curricular items. They work with our new teachers and our substitutes. So anytime there's a substitute in a class, they're visiting those classes first to make sure they're up and running and that they don't need any additional technology support. They're working with us in professional development and PLCs. And they are still providing support to the technology department, answering some tech calls.
Yeah, I'd like to add, they've been phenomenal this week as we rolled out multi-factor authentication.
Oh, great. Thank you, Dwayne.
They've been out there doing a great job helping teachers. They created a tutorial for the teachers to use, go through setting up multi-factor on their phones. They've been out there working with them, which helps me because I can sit back and I can just shoot codes to them. If I have to go out and do that, like I've got 3 coaches out there doing the work. And then I can just kind of steer from the back end at the dashboard. Otherwise, if I'd have to be out there, it'd take 3 times as long to get it all done. But they've been great help this year with us being short of technology staff. They have handled a lot of stuff that would have ended up in our help desk. So I just want to add how phenomenal it's been to have them.
Great. Thank you, Dwayne. Any questions about coaches? All right, moving on. I wanted to give you an idea of some changes coming out of Chapter 49 relative to professional development and induction. So this is a breakdown of what that looks like. There are going to be 3 additional topics that will be required professional development topics for us to cover here at the district. The first is culturally relevant sustaining education. Second is professional ethics. And then, of course, structured literacy. We are doing structured literacy now with some of the programs that we have and some of the professional development that we already have in place. For example, several years ago, a number of our teachers participated in a professional development called LETTERS, which is an acronym for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. So we are hopeful that we will be able to continue that. First, making sure that our new staff or any staff who has not already received the first volume of LETTERS is able to take advantage of that. And then there are 2 volumes total for the training, which would then meet our requirement for structured literacy. We would need to get new staff through volume 1 and all of our staff through volume 2. When I say all of our staff, what I mean by that under the Chapter 49 regulation is that the structured literacy PD is required for all elementary and teachers with middle level certification, all special education teachers, all reading specialists, and all ESL. So those are the categories of teachers we will want to provide training for. Questions about those items? And then future professional development needs. Catherine and I met last week and talked about some of our priorities as we put together the plan of professional development for 23-24. So you can see what those hot topics are. I believe Catherine sat proudly today in the session she was in, knowing that we have already trainers in place for those things. Do you want to elaborate on that, Catherine?
Sure. Over the last couple of years, we've leveraged some grant money. We have in-house QPR trainers. That is a suicide prevention training. Suicide prevention is a mandated training for educators. Stands for question, persuade, refer. So we have in-house trainers already for that. We have a cohort that are finishing up their 4th course, I think, Aaron, or you're officially done now, aren't you? Finished yesterday. A cohort of guidance counselors, social workers, school nurses that are official train the trainers of trauma. So our own people will be training our staff moving forward in Trauma 101. And we also have 2 staff that the McDowell Institute out of Bloomsburg University funded to be trainers of the last one that stands for Youth Mental Health First Aid. So we are set. No outside costs there. Our own people will be training us. So we're in good shape. Alice, as some of you may remember, we had an Alice instructor training. That's our active shooter response training. We had that in the beginning of the year. Over the summer, we hosted an instructor training. And Alice reached out to Courtney and I about 2 or 3 weeks ago and asked if we would host again. The benefit of hosting is that we get free seats. So new administrators coming in, we can give those free seats to, or sometimes we give those free seats to new police officers in the borough that would be responding to us. So as more people sign up, we get more and more free seats, and we will be happy to host that this summer. Thank you.
Can you remind me what Vector Solutions is?
Yep. Go ahead. Vector Solutions is a online software platform that covers many of our mandated courses, HIPAA, FERPA, bloodborne pathogens, as in addition to some of the courses that we do threat assessment, we do students with experiencing homelessness. So many of those mandated trainings from the state are captured in an online training course. They're very time friendly, I would say. You know, we could do a course in 22 minutes. There is a post test, certification is printed out. So we catch a lot within that software. We just had our special education plan, which is similar to a district's comprehensive plan, approved last school year. Built in some of the professional development for teachers, paraprofessionals, administration, out of courses offered through Safe School Vectors, because I was able to use ESSER's money to pay for the special ed library within Vector Solutions. We'll get through those courses by the end of next year. The ESSER's money goes away, so that portion of Vector Solutions will go away, and we'll settle back into the lower price point for Vectors. So Vectors is paid already through grant funding through this school year.
The library of courses under Vector Solutions is also encompasses not only professional staff in the classroom, but also our business office has used it. Our maintenance department has used it. So there's a lot, it's a huge library of online courses. All right, moving into my budget, looking at the Director of Education budget, there are 4 big categories there: books and periodicals, professional services, conferences, travel, and then supplies and memberships lumped into one. So under books and periodicals, so that I outlined this in a way that hopefully made sense, not only showing you what was my budget last year, the budget under Director of Education last year, but what is it this year? And then in those 4 categories, what percentage of the overall budget is it within those? I also wanted to provide current expenditures, so where we are now and how much percentage of the budget has been used, as well as a recommendation for a budget decrease. So you can see what that looks like. So under books and periodicals, I budget 140,000 under here to make sure that we have enough to cover consumable materials, primarily for our Ready Mathematics and iReady. A portion of that comes out of Title I, but we may not always have that money. So that's not some money that we can rely on. Plus, we also use the majority of that funding for salaries and benefits. So it's kind of a backup plan in case we need to use some out of general funds. So based on the amount that's been utilized so far under books and periodicals, I recommended that we could decrease that by 20,000. So you can see the new budget number reflected there. Under professional services, these services are provided by outside vendors. So if the IU is coming in to train for us, for example, in the letters training I mentioned previously, or for iReady, again, currently we've used about 16% of what was budgeted last year. So another recommendation for a decrease. And you can see that is likewise for conferences and travel, as well as supplies and memberships. So overall, looked at just under 40,000 decrease under Director of Education budget. We spoke about that earlier today in our budget meeting. Because conferences and travel has been a topic of interest, and I wanted to make sure that we were providing a full breakdown of that, not only the 20,000 in my budget, but also then looking at the next slide where we can see what is the building level breakdown for conferences and travel budgets for the overall building level, as well as for principal specific. So you can look at those numbers. Comparing what is the current budget in 22-23 and the anticipated 23-24. Any questions about those? Okay, moving into grants and funding under ESSERS. I wanted to and thought it was important for you to have a recap of all of the different ESSERS funds that we have been working with since 2020. So I provided a breakdown of what was the original as well as what we actually spent. This is most relevant for when we get to ESSERS 3. So for example, in ESSERS 3, our initial budget, $4,204,641. At the end of the 22-23 school year, we will have allocated $4,177,939, which will give us a little bit of a cushion going into 23-24. That is also similar in ARP ESSER 7% and ARP homeless. So what I provided for you is what was the original grant funding amount? What will we have allocated at the end of 2023? And then if you look at the very bottom row, 112,229 as of right now will be rolling into cover expenses in the 23-24 school year. As I mentioned, ARP 7% for summer school and after school. The ESSERS leftover is allocated and anticipated to be spent on the school psychologist tuition. And then there's a few other things that we're looking at revising the budgets now. Under ESSERS, ARP ESSER 7%, remember there were those specific set asides. So you can see under the notes section that we needed to allocate a minimum of 30% on social emotional learning, a minimum of 10% on social emotional learning PD, 8% on reading improvement, and then the remainder on learning loss, allocating a minimum of 1% for after school and a minimum for summer school. So I know that's a lot on that slide. Do you have any questions about that? All right, and then typical, your overview of federal funding to include Title 1, 2, 3, and 4. Can see, I think the breakdown is important here because you can see the ebbs and flows of the funding allocations that come to us as a district. As I mentioned earlier, 600 of the majority of that 610 and change is allocated under Title I for reading specialist salary and benefits. And then there's a little left over for curriculum supplies and a required 1% parent involvement allocation. So that's roughly around $6,500 or something like that. What we did differently this year is that we were able to transfer the Title II and Title IV funding into the Title III. And the reason that we did that was because we could then, two reasons. One, we could cover our ESL staff with those funds, plus that kept that money in our district. So if we have an allocation of Title II funds, under the Title II umbrella, a certain portion of that needs to be shared with a non-publics. Okay, by transferring that into Title III, we keep all of those fundings for our students and our staff. And then the last, I believe the last slide is the overview of state and local funding. This is where our continuation of the Ready to Learn helps to fund our full day kindergarten program. And I do also mention the Education Job Training Grant, which is that $250,000 we talked about previously for diversified occupations and the Greenhouse Project. Any questions about any of those items? Comments? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. And we're going to have one last presentation. Mr. Rance, career and technology, please.
Evening. So I have just kind of a brief overview of the CTE budget. Don't believe I've ever actually done this before, but just to kind of give the board an overview of where the funding for our career and tech ed programs comes from and where it goes. So you can go to the next slide there, Dwayne. Just real kind of basic overview. In terms of our district funding for our current 7 programs, excluding CTC tuition, we're looking at for 23-24, $53,820 that goes to supporting all 7 of those programs. Looking at the main purpose of that funding is our supplies. Obviously over the past several years, especially in programs like agriculture, construction trades and automotive technology, the days of watching those programs run on $2,000 or $3,000 is just not feasible any longer, especially with the price of material supplies, lumber, everything, as everybody's evidenced over the rest of this evening. Prices have just gone up. So a large amount of that goes to supplies. The rest of it just goes to kind of some smaller items, supply line or a budget line for fixing equipment, servicing different pieces of equipment, things like that, as well as some costs for running our OAC meetings throughout the year. But that's where the majority of the money goes for the district funded areas of our career and tech ed program. And then the rest of our funding really comes from, next slide there, Dwayne, comes from our Perkins budget. I know I've talked about this in the past, but this is a federal grant that we apply for every single year. The amount that we get allocated from a year-to-year basis doesn't fluctuate a whole lot. As a matter of fact, this past year, 22-23, that's the highest amount we've received ever since I've been at Melton. So we're hoping it stays, in that general range. So we don't know our allocations for the following year until usually late May, early June is when those allocations come out. But the large majority of the money that we get through the Perkins Fund goes through the salary and benefits of our CT paraprofessional, which is a very important position within our program that helps service all of our students, not only with career and technical education elements, but also a lot of their academics as well. One of our performance indicators is our CTE students' performance on their Keystone exam. So it serves a dual role there. We have constant software program updates, a lot of those in our automotive program. We send our entire department to the Integrated Learning Conference every year. That comes from federal funding as well. We fund a lot of our student field trips through a career and tech ed program out of the Perkins Fund. Again, over the past couple of years, that line item has really shot through the roof. So we've had to be a little bit more strategic about the field trips we are sending kids on, but all of those obviously have to align to their program. It's usually business, industry, or post-secondary institutions that align to their pathway and their program. And then equipment. A lot of times that's buying up some used vehicles for our automotive department to be able to work on throughout the year. So again, that's just a real brief overview of where that money goes. I did provide in your packet just an overall breakdown of all those different line items. So if you have any questions specifically about supply line items or anything like that, I'm open to answering any of those questions, but I did just want to give you a brief overview of where that funding goes. Thank you.
So I think I'm going to transition over to Mr. Fink here in a second, but I recognize again, we said this in February, a lot of time and effort spent here, but realistically, when you truly look at these three programs we just presented on today, it's the crux of what we do every day. It's our regular programs, our special ed programs, and it's our CT program that makes us a comprehensive high school. Thank you to my team. I appreciate all the time and effort you put into this. It's evident as a team, the passion you have for what we're presenting our kids. I think what represents us as a board is looking at where we go from here. We want to make sure the information was provided. I think we've done it in one way with these two presentations, meaning the February committee and the March. Last week, we really dove into the numbers. I guess, Mr. Fink, if I can, I'll turn it to you kind of on a next step process within the budgeting.
Sure.
I'll jump in as well if need be.
Yep, no, sounds good. So I don't have a full-blown presentation for everyone. We covered a lot of that a week ago. But what I do have is included in your packet is the updated budget book based on last week's discussion. So you'll see a new column that shows preliminary budget numbers compared to updated, basically bridge version, as now we're working towards proposed final. So you'll see that added column. You'll also see the comparison of percentage change and dollar amount change from last year's budget to what's being proposed for current year budget to what's being proposed for next year's budget. So my ask of everyone here tonight is, because we're on a bit of a compressed schedule to stay on track for where we want to be for approving this budget in May, would be to please review that updated budget document. And I'd love to have at least some discussion next week to get an idea of what you guys want to see added, removed, changed, updated on. Because then what's going to happen is April 4th for our meeting there, we will have a proposed final budget that will be voted on to advertise, not to accept or to make final, but to just make it public. So that way we can start our countdown, because I believe it's 20 days of advertisement that we need. So that's why we're going to look at doing that early April. And then that allows us to still make changes, still update it in the committee meeting in May, and then stay on track for the vote to accept the final in or at a regular meeting in May. Any questions on that? Anything since last week or that you might have? But like I said, definitely come prepared next week with any questions that you have. And we will continue to update everything as we get new information. We actually just did that today as well. We sat down with some of the central office team members and went through the full budget. We went through the whole thing, looking for areas to make adjustments and changes. And you'll see those included in the new budget document that you guys have. And then last thing that I have, just to make sure you're aware, I did include the millage, the mill rate changes just for both our counties, Union and Northumberland. So you can see the other school districts that are in our two counties that we cover, and see kind of how mills have changed over time and the progress that each school district has made as far as increases or decreases in that time, and kind of where we compare to them. So that's all I have. I don't know if you want to add anything, Dr. Bickard.
No, I think our intention is to work with you, that we're all collectively on the same page of what we need. And again, we're going to differ on some opinions, but what do we need to put in front of you as we move into April and May that is workable, that is viable? Mr. Fink just said today, we spent time today trying to look at those. How do we lower here? How do we adjust here? And we keep coming back to the same idea of, we know our staffing is our largest number. I shared with you the idea of realignment and the scheduling. I think are two tickets to not hurting programs and doing something differently. And not unfortunately, we're just not there next year to make that giant change. But we're working towards it. So please share thoughts, share ideas. We're open to them. We just want to make sure we present to you where you want to see us moving when it comes to whether a tax increase is involved to the full extent, or what percentage, Mr. Fink presented on. So please ask those questions. Let's do that next week. So we're moving this process forward.
I have one question on the mill rates. So Milton and Ware Run both have Northumberland, Union County. Why are our mills 2 points less in Northumberland than Ware Run, but yet 4 points higher in Union?
That's because of the tax equalization. So we have
It's equal, should be equal, correct?
It's how much
They're in both
property in
counties?
that school district.
No,
falls
like
in.
we have 33% of our our taxation, our tax levy comes from Union County.
Okay.
Warrior Runs isn't 33%.
Well, they also have Montour.
Yeah, they have, so there's varying levels of
Okay.
how much revenue comes from each county, which can impact that. Also, assessed values would impact it as well. You're only seeing one half of the calculation. So
Gotcha.
the other impact is like if you have a community, like a school district that has much higher total assessed values overall, their millage rates are going to be lower.
Right.
So really, this is more to look at the trend, just to see like, are we trending upward as kind of a 2-county community, or are we trending downward? To compare mills to mills for different school districts, this doesn't work because we're very different communities. Any other questions?
You have a question? This is Dr. Strasser.
What's our projected revenues again with no tax increase?
Projected revenues with no tax increase?
Correct.
1 second. Projected, you want total revenues or just tax revenues?
Total revenues.
Total revenues. So if you take the 40,548 that's in there, and then you would subtract off about 900,000. So put us what, 39.6 roughly?
Can you call for help? Somebody call 911.
Yeah, go for it.
Someone call 911.